Good morning, afternoon, evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm George Moss again here at allpointstv.com and also 92.1 WFOB. And we're very glad to have them aboard as well, our new partners here at the studio. And we hope you'll stay tuned for the next hour. We are the program called What's Going On. And we come on every Monday from 2 o'clock to 3. And today we have a treat for you because after this program is over, we will be preceding the program called Satori's Black History Corner that comes on at 3:30. And they'll be in the studio promptly ready to go at that time, and they'll stay around for about 30 minutes. We're here for the whole hour, and we will be speaking on two topics today. Two topics. I want to talk a little bit about Charlottesville and bring some things in about that have not yet been exposed through the media. In fact, there's a cover-up going on as far as what really went on in that town. And I want to also talk about the situation that's going on in North Korea, because we are very close to a conflagration that's going to be taking place if what is threatened to happen, if it does happen, then we are going to be at war. And I want to talk about that as a second topic today in our discussion. The reason why I want to start with Charlottesville is because I think that is really part of the larger landscape in terms of the problem with North Korea. And we've got to get real smart in this country in a hurry. We have got to understand what's going on in this country, because if we don't wake up to how we are being manipulated in this country by the political class, by the political elite, then what the framers put in place and what they feared that would unravel what they put in place will be here, and that will in fact be the fear of the framers, that fear they had that we would have those in power that would undermine the strictures that were put in place at the convention in 1787. They feared that the political class, and that's really what the Constitution was written about. It was drawn up and drafted in 1787 and ratified in 1788. And it was ratified with the idea that you would have the controls in place to keep the politicians in abeyance. And you would also have certain protections built into it, so those who are part of the political class could not cross the lines that were pretty much drawn in the sand, and those lines of demarcation would in fact be a parameter around which we would have a barrier around the rights of the people, so that those rights would be inviolable by government. And so the Bill of Rights was put in there 3 years after the Constitution was ratified, with the idea that we now have the government in place, and we have the separation of powers put in different corridors, so that no one of the three branches of federal government would be out of control, because the powers would be disaggregated in three different corridors of power, and each one of those corridors would be able to check on the other corridor of power, and they would therefore act as a check and balance through the separation of powers on the federal level. And then we had the continued division of power. Not only was it disaggregated on the horizontal level, but also vertically, in terms of the federal government having power that is enumerated to its level of authority, and that which was not delegated in Article 1, Section 8 to the federal government would therefore accrue to the states. And therefore the power was not only to be dispersed horizontally, but also vertically, in terms of how you would in fact have the power, some on the federal level and the rest of it on the state level, and all powers is not delegated in Article 1, Section 8 to the federal government would therefore accrue to the states, unless the Constitution expressly prohibited it to the states or to the people therein. So they had it pretty well figured out of how you actually do it in terms of the words put on parchment. The problem is that government finds a way to inch itself over time from underneath the umbrella of the restraints and go out of control at some point, and just act as if the parchment, the limitations are not there. And we're at this point right now. And I think that in Virginia, we have an unraveling that's taking place here, because I think the politicians have in fact, I don't have to think about it. The politicians are now coming at the liberties in this country, and they're using the bugaboo of race in order to bring that result about. I don't think this is innocent in terms of what occurred in Charlottesville. Think about that for a minute, about what occurred in terms of another statue, the statue of Robert E. Lee, the city council, and also this mayor, who I think is absolutely ridiculous, Mike Signor, and somehow his name has gotten lost in the mix, and they're putting all this emphasis, and all the media attention has been placed upon Richard Spencer and Jason Kessler. These are the two persons who organized the what they call the alt-right movement. And this was the protest. Basically what they did was a protest, this continued attack upon the heritage of the country, really the specific attack upon the heritage of the South, but it's really the attack upon the country, because we have a history that has been made in this country, and part of that history is what occurred between 1861 and 1865. And this history has to do with what they call the Civil War, which I call the War of Secession, or you could call it the war to repel the northern invasion of the South. This is not a war for slavery. And because it's been situated that way in the history book, most persons believe that the good guys were in the North and the bad guys were in the South, and therefore the monuments that testify to the bad guys trying to maintain slavery, trying to maintain the institution through which blacks were in captivity on those plantations. It was the good guys in the North coming down in the South to fight to get those blacks out of captivity. This is the kind of history that's being taught, and that's what people are being herded with, these ridiculous politicians, of which one of them is Mike Signor, the mayor of Charlottesville, Virginia. And I think these politicians are very, he's one of them, but these politicians are very dangerous. Before coming on the air, I was writing down what I thought would be the top 4 most dangerous elements in this country that's going to tear this country apart if we don't get some handle on what's going on here and what they're doing. I listed what I think are the 4 most dangerous entities in this country at this point in time. The framers did not foresee the danger that the media could bring about, the press could bring about. And we do have the freedom of press in this country in Article 1, in Amendment 1, but I don't think that, nobody could have foreseen the danger that the press would become. But I put down here what I think are the 4 most dangerous elements in the United States at this point in time. The first one I put down here as a danger is the political class in this country, the political elite. The politicians, in my judgment, based upon looking at everything that is happening in the United States, having read such books as It's Dangerous to Be Right When the Government is Wrong, a book written by Judge Napolitano, but he takes the idea of that from Voltaire. Voltaire is the one to make the statement, it's dangerous to be right when the government is wrong. And you take that book and you take his other works, one of which is The Constitution in Exile, and that book right there is similarly situated in terms of what it talks about as the book called Who Killed the Constitution. And each of these books bring you back to the political class. So I put down there the most dangerous element in this country right now are the politicians of the United States. These people are very dangerous. And what they're doing, and you saw it in Charlottesville, they are pitting one group against the other. And they're using the Confederacy to bring it about, and people's lack of understanding of what the Confederacy was really about. General Lee, Robert E. Lee, Jefferson Davis, and other figures that were that tried to succeed from the Union because of the slavery, not because of slavery. The secession movement was based upon what they saw was a growing tyranny of the federal government. So don't forget, here we had at the Constitutional Convention certain strictures in place put there by the framers, and the ones that were trying to hold on to what the framers had put in place was not the northern states. The ones that were holding on to what had been put in place in 1787 by the framers, those were the ones in the South. And they saw the federal government taking more and more and more liberties away from the people, and they stood up with the ultimate weapon that the states had if that result began to play out on the political landscape, and that was the right to then withdraw your allegiance to the Union that you had in fact voluntarily associated yourself with at the Constitutional Convention in 1787. Don't forget now. So I would ask this question, and don't forget that when you have Article 1, Section 8, where there's the enumeration of powers that the federal government has, the question that has to be asked here is the federal government allocating powers it would have unto itself, or are these powers being dictated to the federal government by another outside entity? And you say that the federal government will have these powers, have those powers, and have some other powers. The question then becomes, who is doing that delegation? We talk about the delegation of powers. We don't talk about who's doing the delegating. But if you look at how it is in fact constructed, you can tell that where the delegation is coming from, because you see that it's in the kinds of service of the government leaders, what is put in place in terms of the terms in office. If the federal government is going to be the ones that are dictating and delegating the powers that accrue to the federal government, then they would put it in giving the federal government authority that supersede the authority given to the states then in terms of the amount of years they serve in their office. For example, you would expect then to have the federal office holders, that is, would be the president, would have the longest terms to be served would be the President of the United States. But that's not what you have in the Constitution. What you have is you have 2 years, 4 years, and 6 years in terms of the elected officials. 2 years for the members of the House of Representatives, 4 years for the Senate, 4 years for the President, and 6 years for the senators. So why would that be the case then? Why would you have 2 years for the members of the House, 4 years for the President, but the ones that would have 6 years, longer than in the other 2 terms of the members of the House and the President, would be the senators? They would have 6 years. And why would the Constitution allocate 6 years to the senators, but only 4 years to the President, and then only 2 years to the members of the House of Representatives? So the question comes up then, who are those office holders and who do they represent? In the House for 2 years, those are the people's representatives inside of the states. They go before the American people every 2 years, where the American people can resituate them or not resituate them back in power, but they go before them to seek their pleasure every 2 years, and if they in fact disregard the people can take them out after 2 years. Then you have the president, who goes back before the people for a 4-year term, and he goes back to the people every 4 years. But there's a group that was put in place in the federal government that does not go before the people. The president goes before the people, and so does do the members of the House of Representatives. But there's a group that does not go before the people, but go before the states. And that would be those who are the senators, prior to them changing that in 1913 with the passage of the 17th Amendment, because the idea of the senators were that the states would in fact send their senators from each state to Congress, and they would be the voice of the senators that are to make sure that the powers that are allocated to the federal government and those that accrue to the states would sit there in the Congress as representatives of the state to keep the federal government true to its delegation, so that they must answer to the states in the Senate, so that they do not in fact go across the lines of their allocation of power within the federal government, keeping the federal government honest to its mission. And that was the way it was set up by the framers. They were very prescient about how to allocate power, and then to have watchdogs in the federal government, put them in the federal government as well as the states, so that they could hold them on a vertical level responsible for what they would be doing in the nation's capital. And did a very good job of handling that, up until that was changed by popular election of the senators, which was never intended. And we have this out of control thing going on right now, because what was intended is not what we have right now. We've shaken the system like a spider web. We've shaken that spider web with the change of the way we elect senators. And the spider, I call it a spider web, because when you shake a spider's web, at any point of the web, the entire web shakes. And this was a tremendous shaking of the system put in place by the framers. It's been shouted about some other things too, but that was a major change in how this system was intended to operate. So the politicians would be the first ones I would put down there as the most dangerous element in this country right now that threaten the system that's put in place by the framers. We are on the brink. We're right there at the brink right now. The second most dangerous element in this country right now, next to the political class, is the media. And we'll talk about that in terms of what happened in Charlottesville, because we saw part of it play out in terms of what was reported out of the media, because what they reported is not what occurred down in Charlottesville this past weekend. That is not what happened, what people are reading in the press. The third element of danger this country has to watch out for, and this is as real as it gets, is the left. The left is very dangerous in this country right now, and they're making it appear that the danger is on the right, and that's what occurred in Charlottesville, when what happened in Charlottesville has nothing to do with the right. Has everything to do with the left. We'll talk about that as well during this program. And then these organized groups out here, such as these paid groups, such as Antifa, which is Antifa is A-N-T-I-F-A, and it is supposed to be it stands for anti-fascist. But Antifa is a fascist group, and it, like Black Lives Matter, is an organized group of gangsters funded by George Soros. And what you had in Charlottesville was the group, white nationalists. I want to talk about that for a minute. Whites in this country see that the country is being given over. The country that was built with the framers' foundation and blueprint in place, they see this country being handed over, just given away. They see the politicians in this country turning this country into a third world country. And they're doing it because we have with this film that I saw this past weekend, there's a film called The Enemies Within. You'd be surprised. In that film, you'd be surprised of who was identified in that film as Enemies Within. But one of the key parts of it was to show that 40 members of the Senate of some of the enemies within, John McCain, people like that, Dianne Feinstein, and all you have to do is just listen to them right now. Just listen to what they're saying right now on the national level. We are in one of the most dangerous moments in our history right now with North Korea. And guess who the left is talking about in terms of where the danger is coming from? Donald Trump. In fact, I heard, I was listening to a tape before coming to the studio, and that was Martha Ravitz saying that the world is used to the vitriolic rhetoric of Kim Jong-un, but they are not used to the rhetoric similarly situated of the President of the United States. So here's this guy, Kim Jong-un, that's threatening the United States, and what they want Donald Trump to do in the atmosphere of this venom to try diplomacy. And it's diplomacy that has gotten the threat that we're now facing, that they tried diplomacy, buying this man off, paying money that he would not build a nuclear arsenal. And we're now at the brink of a nuclear war in this country because of the dereliction of duty of these presidents, starting back with Bill Clinton in 1992, elected in 1992. The tip-off point was what he did in 1994, trying to buy these persons off, and continued under George Bush, and accelerated it more so under Barack Obama. In fact, I would go so far as to say that these three presidents that we've had prior to the one now, those persons should be charged, whether it's consciously or not, should be tried for treason. Given what's happened to this country, the danger we're in right now comes out of the last three administrations that we've had. It reminds me really of what occurred in 1938 in Munich. There shouldn't just have been Viken Quisling of Norway, who was siding with Adolf Hitler and selling the country of Norway down the drain through his Quislings inside of that country. But look at what Chamberlain did. And after the war came to a close, Quisling was in fact executed by the Norwegian state because they saw that his treason had threatened the national viability of Norway, and they took retribution against him when the war came to a close. He was in fact executed. You can take it from there as what should be happening to these persons that commit treason against their nation. But this amounts to treason is going on in the United States. It hasn't been identified as treason. But treason was the one thing that the framers knew that this country could not withstand, to have government, to have treason inside the government. And that's what Napolitano is talking about when he says it's dangerous to be right when your government is wrong. Very dangerous. So the politicians, the media, the left, and then these organized groups out here. And I would name the top two that are very dangerous is Antifa and Black Lives Matter. And they are the two groups out here right now funded by George Soros that must take the responsibility for what happened in Charlottesville, Virginia last weekend. We're coming up on break. We'll take a break and let the station 92.1, our partner here at allpointstv.com, identify itself, and they'll be gone for 4 minutes. They'll come back in about 4 minutes. Okay, while they are away, we will continue our part of the program. They'll be back with us in 4 minutes. We will continue what we're talking about, and we'll bring them back up to speed. We'll bring them up to speed once they get back from their break from the radio station. We have not talked about what really happened down in Charlottesville, and the media is involved in covering up what occurred. This march The permit to have this assembly under the First Amendment, where the organizers of this march, Richard Spencer and Jason Kessler, went to the authorities to get the permits to have a peaceful demonstration under the umbrella of the First Amendment, where you have the right to peacefully assemble. You don't have the right to go out there and create havoc, but you have the right to peacefully assemble. And I can testify that when the right meets by itself without anyone coming into the environment, the grounds that they meet on, I met on in Washington. I went to Washington with Glenn Beck's rally, and I can tell you that when that rally was over, and they had there in that park, if they had 5 there, they had 500,000. I was there in the March on Washington on August 28, 1963, and I can tell you that park had double what I saw when Dr. King called his second march on Washington in 1963. King's first march, as you know, was in 1957. But when King called his second march on Washington, after having the prayer pilgrimage that was 6 years earlier, the second one, in which he gave his I Have a Dream speech, they had 250,000 persons in that park, according to the estimates of how large that march was. The ones that came there to hear King's, that went there to demonstrate. They went there really to demonstrate for jobs and freedom. This way it was defined at that time by Randolph, who said, Asa Philip Randolph, who said this is the march for jobs and freedom. Well, at that march, the second one that King was involved in, King gave that is I Have a Dream speech. There were 250,000 persons there, according to the park estimates. How many persons were there? You could see down the mall how large that crowd was, and where it stopped down that mall. There were double that number of persons in that mall that Glenn Beck called in 2010. And when that march was over, because they were the only ones out there, there were some persons that were demonstrating, but they were demonstrating peacefully in that mall. They were from Howard University holding signs up. But because there was no violence from the left, that march was so peaceful, and it was such a clean march, there was not even a gum wrapper on the grounds once they left. In fact, the marshals that were there said they had never seen the grounds that were kept so clean after a march had run its course. And when the march was over, you could look at the ground. The grounds were pristine at that point. We were now ready to welcome back the viewers and the listeners from other points that we have part of our listening team, and we want to welcome back 92.1 WFOB. I want to welcome you back to the program.
Let's give a recap of what
we just want to recap what we were talking about here, and we're just saying that it was not the right, as they call them the all right. It was not the right that caused the violence in Charlottesville. Whenever the right is able to go and have its march, exercising the freedom to come together to speak, violence does not break out.
Years ago, when Rush Limbaugh, when I listened to him, he was talking about this gathering of conservatives in Fort Collins, Colorado, I think it was, and there was like a huge amount, 75,000, 100,000 people showing up. Afterwards, they showed pictures of the grounds. Now, there wasn't even one, wasn't even no significant litter or anything else they could show on that shot. But whereas those people who did the protests up there in North Dakota about the pipeline, they had to bring bulldozers to take out that. And these are supposed to be people, environmentally concerned people, concerned about the environment, purity of the earth, and all this. Just debris and garbage and stuff they had to pick up with like bulldozers and backhoes and dump them into dumpsters and stuff.
Yes,
dump trucks. So
when the left shows up, you can bet one thing thing is going to happen when the left shows up. Violence is going to take place, and those on the right are going to be blamed for it. The only ones really that had a permit to be out there demonstrating were the ones that were part of the, they call it alt-right, but what this really is a group of people that want to maintain some of the traditions in the country, and to see that we're losing these traditions. And the alt-right definition of who they are was put there by Hillary Clinton. That's not who these persons are.
Well, I'd like to know where the right-wing, left-wing paradigm even holds anymore, because let's face it, years ago, the left-wing usually referred to people who sat on the left of the King of France, back, 1700s?
Yeah.
Where does that have any applicability now? The right, the alleged, quote-unquote, right here is not trying to back a king or anything else. They say there's established law, and guess what? The left continuously holds the idea about, they get the ACLU, oh, this violates our constitutional guarantees and the Bill of Rights guarantees. They use it as a bludgeon, but when somebody else says that they want to be able to use the same principle, oh no, that's not allowed to you. That's not allowed to you.
I agree with you that the left-right paradigm doesn't work anymore, and we need to get other terms to define what's going on, because this is really about money and power, and the political class wants more and more and more power, and they can only have more and more power if they're taking more and more liberty. And you cannot take more and more liberty unless you create the circumstance and the environmental conditions in which that can be seen as being justifiable. And that's why you have them pushing people up against each other in the country. I mean, you knew what to expect once you had the monuments taken down. You knew exactly what was going to happen. Traditionalists are going to go out there and they're going to protest taking these monuments down. And why are we taking these monuments down? In places like Charlottesville, Virginia. Virginia was the capital of the Confederacy. So why would they have states like Virginia or South Carolina where they're going to start this attacking these monuments? In South Carolina. South Carolina was the first state to secede from the Union. So they go there and they stir, you know how you stir a hornet's nest up? You go there and you stir up the hornet's nest there, and you get the reaction that you can, in fact, before you do anything, you can predict what the reaction is going to be. People are not going to like it. And if you go to Washington, D.C., and you take down the Capitol where you have the statue of Abraham Lincoln in the Capitol, how would people respond to that? Are they going to like that? So you do this deliberately to stir the hornet's nest up. And then when you get the reaction that you can predict is going to be the case, you bust in, as George Soros did, and that's not been reported anywhere in the media. You bust in Black Lives Matter, and you bust in the Antifa group, A-N-T-I-F-A, who stands for the Anti-Fascist Group. But if you look at the flyer they had out there, you can see that the Anti-Fascist Group is a fascist group. They want to beat up the people that are protesting legally, their right to express themselves. And when violence broke out, they want to blame the alt-right group, as they call it, for the violence, when the violence is instigated by George Soros. And it's instigated, quite frankly, by Mike Signor. I mean, they're very smart. They were saying that, I was listening to Mayor, he's a mayor of Charlottesville. Mike Signor is the mayor of Charlottesville, and he's on there like he didn't have anything to do with the violence that broke out. But if you go back and look at the picture, you can see what was going on here where the violence broke out. Because when George Soros' group came on the scene, talking about Black Lives Matter, and the Antifa group bust in there, as soon as they arrived, what you saw was an absence of the police presence that was supposed to have been there to protect the marchers. And they dissipated from the scene. We have people that were eyewitnesses that were there on the ground to watch it and report in the alternative media what occurred in Charlottesville. And there was a non-presence once the two left groups arrived on the scene. The other person there that was supposed to be there to keep the groups apart, they were told to stand down. One person, and I'm looking to see what happens with this one person that drove the car into the group of demonstrators. I'm waiting to hear who this person was and who he was representing, but he wasn't representing Richard Spencer and Jason Kessler, because that was not part of what the march intended to do. What they intended to do was come together to protest taking down these monuments, and therefore doing an erasure of the Southern heritage, the Southern history. And they had a permit to be out there to do that. Now that we had a breakout of violence, the media is trying to make it appear that the alt-right was the creators of the violence, and that's not true. I think this was a setup, quite frankly. I think Mike Signer, if I was going to investigate this thing right now, I would bring Mike Signer up there to testify about what was going on here and who gave the orders for the police that were there and the other security members that were there to stand down, because those orders were given, and we have that on tape, where the police officer was saying they were told to stand down. And the question here is a very open question. We need to have an answer to this question. Who gave the orders for the security team to stand down and not do its job, to which there was in fact violence? We have to understand something here right now. If the right, quote unquote, has a peaceful demonstration, and they have peaceful demonstrations, the peace is broken when others come in to start harassing them, people throwing bottles and things like that. Stopping a march that has permit to be out there is not those persons throwing the bottles. They have a right to be there legally because went there and got a permit, and then persons come to try to stop them from having a peaceful demonstration.
Well, you know what's weird though? We have to qualify saying they had a permit. If the Constitution and the Bill of Rights was allowed as it should be, that whole permit process would be unneeded. But you know, that's beside the point.
Yeah,
that's beside the point. I mean, it's just like everybody here on the left. I don't remember all the leftist organizations going through the due diligence of getting permits. They just show up.
They just show up, John,
and stuff, and they do mounts of violence. But nobody. I mean, they want Trump. The left that wants Trump to actually take personal responsibility for this. Then why? What did Obama take personal responsibility for the violence done by Black Lives Matter or anything? No.
No, he didn't.
No. That's matter of fact. I think he brought some of their leaders into the White House.
I agree with you 1,000%, John. I wrote about this on my Facebook post, and I'm going to be writing about another part of this whole scenario that's taking place right now.
Nobody's responsible for the actions done by individuals other than the individuals who committed those actions themselves. It's absurd for somebody to be not denounced because they don't feel bad enough to take responsibility for something somebody else has done. That's absurdity to actually take responsibility for
I'll be doing another segment on this today in my Facebook post, but I was posting trying to give the people some information that they're being denied because all of this is orchestrated. And really the group that had permit to go into Charlottesville and demonstrate against pulling these monuments down, and they're pulling these monuments down just for one reason, to put people up against each other. That's what this is about. In order to take the freedoms away from the American people, the right to peacefully assemble, what they are doing is they are creating the environment. In other words, they walked into a trap. And that trap was set by Mike Signer and also by the governor, who is nothing other than a Clinton surrogate who has aspirations to run in 2020. And that's this governor. I don't have any respect for this guy, Terry McAuliffe. This was all orchestrated by the politicians. Have you noticed that all these situations take place where these Democrats are? And they go, if you go look in New Orleans, you see the same thing. Because by them creating the environment, then once the chaos kicks in, which they help orchestrate, they can control the narrative because they are the ones in control of the local community where these things are taking place. You don't have this going on in these cities where the Republicans are. This is all about trying to constitute power that the left has lost, because the American people are waking up to what these people are doing. There are only 15 governors right now in the country that are in fact Democrats. The rest of them are Republicans. They got 35 governors right now that are not Democrats in this country. And the people are waking up to what's going on here. But in Charlottesville, Virginia, this was the people went into a trap laid for them. First of all, they tried to stop them from having the rally, and they would not give them permit, and they filed a suit in federal court because you have the right to peacefully assemble. And this march would have been a peaceful assembly of people that were there to demonstrate against these politicians that are pulling these monuments down and using the Confederacy in order to create discord in society, and by creating discord, pushing people up against each other, and people can't see what these politicians, some people cannot see what these politicians are in fact doing. Some of you are getting it, but a lot of people do not get it, and those are the ones out there, you know, the snowflakes, and they're using them as the useful idiots to create this chaos and trying to make it look like this chaos was caused by those that had a permit. I want to come back to that point about them having a permit. They were out there legally able. They were able to be out there because they'd gone through the protocols to get the permit to peacefully assemble. And that's what they had in mind. But when you bring the other folks in there to create the noise and create the conflict, then the peaceful assembly that was intended cannot go on because the gangsters show up.
Did anybody oppose the Million Man March, or Million Men March they've had a couple of times, I guess, in D.C.? I don't remember anybody opposing that. Meetings trying to meet them with force on force. Maybe there's small groups, but I don't remember anything with like large numbers or any sort of violence done to it. Did you?
No, John. We had 500,000 that were there at the Glenn Beck March, and that march was peaceful. There was not one incident. It was incredible how serene everything was. The only ones that were there were some students from Howard University holding signs up, but they didn't do anything in terms of throwing anything, and there was no reason for anybody else to get out of control because we were there to have a peaceful demonstration. And we were saying in the aftermath of them taking over the health care, we were there to say to the federal government that we are not for you taking any more of our rights away from us. That our health care should be between us and our doctors, not the federal government.
So we keep on saying this, I mean, and you and I do what we can to prevent it. But the American people overall they say they have any kind of resistance within just a couple of, people from the left criticizing or ridiculing you, then it seems to go away and they push through what they want to do, and we all blithely just kind of, not blithely, but just, okay, we'll just live with it. It's just an obstacle. We have to live with it. There should be more outrage when they do stuff to us that we know it's a violation of our rights. They anticipate us having something to lose because we won't go out on a limb and act radical. Those on the left usually don't have anything to lose.
Yeah.
So that's the reason why those who oppose and who have constitutionality in mind are the ones who are less likely to be violent because they have something to lose. The left encourages people not to have anything to lose so they can keep on using them like other useful idiots. Yeah.
If we're not careful, we're going to lose everything because we're going to lose this country. We are these people we have the hidden enemy. These people are globalists, and their intent is to take this country down from within, and they can only do that if they are in fact making sure that the people are not united down here at this level, and if they're united to look up at the ones who are the ones orchestrating this confusion. These persons represent the political elite. That's who these people are. And they are rubbing people's noses up against each other because the intent is to divide the people so they can conquer both groups. They don't care anything about the people they got out there that's doing that. They're using these people. These are the useful idiots. They are dependent upon people not being able to figure anything out, to figure out, number one, how they're being manipulated, and then to figure out how to counteract that. What the people should really be doing is coming together and forming a unity so they can then look in the face of their puppeteers, because all of this is in fact being orchestrated
years ago
by the puppeteers.
When we had the Occupy Wall Street group here in Flint going on, I was talking to people there. I was doing interviews with them, and there was common ground with many of the libertarians and the Occupy Wall Street people, and they're more on the socialist bent. But a lot of them, the one thing they did identify was the Federal Reserve System as being this obstacle for true, more economic equality. That was basically the monetary, the money suppliers. The Federal Reserve System is the impediment to that. So both the libertarians and people, I would say more on the decided, if you want to use that term, left, actually had a common enemy. But no, see what happens, they degenerated, and they just basically now, one group of people seems to just want a handful of people to be taxed and their money given to other people who don't care about anything in their own existence, or are not willing to put forth the effort for their own existence, and they want to, and that the population is going to largely grow faster than the people who are the producers. That's what it seems like it's going to boil down to, and it's going to be catastrophic when that happens.
Yeah, we are in a real situation here, caught in between the ones that don't understand the game plan and those at the top that are doing the manipulation, and there is a segment of the population, about half the population, caught in between the two. As they divided the American people against each other, they are orchestrating it, and so those that are aware of what's going on are caught in the middle of those that don't have a clue, and then the puppeteers, the political class, the media, and so on and so forth, that's manipulating the environment. And they're not just doing it in terms of Charlottesville. We're seeing the same thing play out in terms of what's going on in this problem that Donald Trump is trying to handle with an outside. We have a threat here to this country. And we had, 64 members of the Congress last week come out to condemn Donald Trump for the clarity of his position in terms of this country. He said that Kim Jong-un has gotten away with many things in these other administrations, but not with him. And he's told Kim Jong-un very carefully and clearly, he said that he's going to see what he does probably around Wednesday, because Kim Jong-un is for no reason has threatened to send 4 missiles in the vicinity of Guam. And Donald Trump has assured Guam and has said to Kim Jong-un in no uncertain terms that if that goes on, then North Korea is going to be very bad for North Korea. And he's made it very clear to the people of North Korea, the military of North Korea, that he says what he means, and he means what he says. And I can tell you what's going to happen here. If they send those 4 missiles into any place close to Guam, if they launch those missiles, Donald Trump and this nation is going to war.
You know what? Trump could have sat back and whined.
It's just as clear as that.
Trump could have sat back and whined that he inherited all these issues from another former president. Yeah, I mean, he inherited the problem, and but it's like, it's not fair. I mean, he's got all this on his plate. Well, he's not doing that because he actively campaigned. He's not like some other people who should remain nameless, but they should know. He kept on whining about how he inherited all these problems from his predecessors. Duh. That's what part of being the president is. That's the obstacle of being a good president or a bad one, is dealing with your predecessor's screw-up.
That's right. And what he's doing is pointing out it was a mess they took over. But what Donald Trump also said is that we are going to deal with the mess that we will. If you're left with a mess, you can't keep pointing to the mess as to why your administration is not able to succeed. And if they really showed what Donald Trump has done in terms of success in the first 6 months of his administration, if they really reported what this man has been able to accomplish, they'll have to report that Donald Trump has done more in the 6 months of his administration that's been done in the history of the United States. This man's got a lot done. And I looked at the list of things that he's actually accomplished, and I put it on the side of any other president and say, okay, here's the things of the next president has done great things in the first 6 months. And it pales in comparison what Donald Trump has accomplished. But they don't want to report that, and a lot of people think that Donald Trump's administration has failed because they won't report what Donald Trump has done. But look at the unemployment rate, the lowest in 16 years.
So the thing is, I agree. You and I know that the economic success or failure can't be pinned totally to a president. You know, we know that. It's the people who are willing to undertake the risk, who are willing to go get the loans, who are willing to put their name on the dotted line. Those are the people actually, and they should enjoy the benefit of that. I'm sorry, they should. I mean, that sounds, the Democrats would be screaming bloody murder for me saying that. But I mean, we look at them, they were saying that back then when their booming economy under Obama, you know, the stock market was doing well. But largely it was a jobless recovery. For the most part, there was nowhere near the expectations or the need for job creation to keep it actually at a steady, you know, percentage level unemployment rate, because they're always one that does exist for various reasons. But they always want to say, oh, look at all the stocks market's doing well. If that was a Republican underneath that and they had what's happening, they'd say, well, yeah, but still largely jobless recovery. They weren't saying that under Obama. They're applauding that. But basically it wasn't meshing out where people were getting hired. There was just, it was doing well for the investment class. So that's what they kept on saying. Look what he's done for the economy. Well, he himself has done nothing for the economy. It's other stuff behind it. It's like the spending bills and all this thing have a connection to that. But the large public, at large, just sees this guy's in power and this is doing well. They don't see the underlying thing because they don't want to examine what comprises the economy. You know
yourself, John, because you've been looking at it for a while, and that is that when Obama came into office in 2009, the national debt stood at $10.6 trillion. It doubled in the 8 years that he was president. The Obama administration, because the Democratic Party, quite frankly, is an entitlement party, and you feed these constituents to maintain the party's constituency base, and so therefore all these entitlements have got to be fed. That's a power base of the Democratic Party. And so the national debt went from 10.6 trillion to almost 20 trillion in an 8-year period of time. And during the Obama administration, Obama created more debt than every administration up to his tenure almost combined. Because 10.6 trillion and then 20 trillion when he left office, because of the spending this president was in fact doing, talking about shovel-ready jobs. There are no shovel-ready jobs. Jobs have to be created by those who are willing to expand jobs and create more opportunity, because they're going to reap the benefits of the opportunities they create. If you don't do that, then in other words, if you create an environment where the productivity of the businesses are in fact taken from them and government sees the wealth, the productivity goes away, because people are not willing to be incentivized to produce if they don't get the benefit of that which they produce. In other words, the producer has a selfish interest that motivates the producer to produce. Why? What's the selfish interest? The production will accrue to the producers of the production. They want to benefit from it. They don't want it taken from by the government. And when the government gets involved in it to confiscate it, the production goes down. That's what happened in Venezuela. That's why Venezuela doesn't have food right now. That's why people are starving in Venezuela. Because the government does not learn these lessons. The lesson that they don't learn is a lesson of capitalism. And that lesson is that you let the producers, you have to follow the law. But the law that the capitalists follow is a law of supply and demand. In other words, the law of production is that the producers must respect the consumers, because without the consumers, the producer cannot sell the goods that are being produced, because they don't have the coercive power to make the consumer buy the products they produce. In other words, what regulates the producers is the fact that the consumers cannot be coerced to deal with them. They deal with them if they are in fact pleasing to them, that these products are in fact products they want to buy. That's really the law that we ought to have in the marketplace. And these politicians think they can pass a law in Congress that oversees the law of the economic laws, in other words, and you can suspend that. It's just like trying to suspend the law, what they call the law of gravity. You can't do it. It's not going to be done. And so we have now come to a twilight point in the nation's history, and we're going to have to understand what's going on and get real smart here real quick. Because if we don't understand what's going on here and take the reins of power back in our hands, we're going to lose everything. And that's what the framers were fearful of, and we've arrived there now. Okay, keep paying attention, because this is getting very serious. Want you to, again, as always, follow your dream. Because if you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.